Hey, what's up? Welcome to AngularAir. I'm Justin Schwarzenberger, and today we've got the Meta Show. We're going to be talking about creating technical content with our guest. So on our show today, we've got a panelist, Mike Brocky. Mike, how's it going?
How's it going, everybody?
And our guest today, we've got Carlos Taborda. Carlos, how are you doing?
Doing great, guys. Pleasure to be here. An honor to be in your presence.
Sweet. Well, happy to have you. Tell us a little bit about yourself really quick, what you got going on and stuff like that.
Absolutely. So I was initially invited to the show because I run a podcast called Tech People at Work. We've actually got a new podcast in the works called JavaScript at Work. I had Jeff on the show. The Tech People at Work is a podcast where we bring real tech people from the tech world and try to get a little bit about the sense of what they do on a day-to-day versus what we're told that tech people, what tech people do on TV and or media. So that's a little bit of what the show is. Tell tech people's stories and learn from them. I'm a principal at an agency called Gistia Labs. So we do engineering as a Scrum team for larger firms, and I'm also one of the co-authors of NG Book, which you guys are probably familiar. Ari Lerner is my co-author.
Very cool, very cool. Well, glad to have you on the show today, and look forward to hearing all this information you got to share with us.
Awesome.
Then our other guest is somebody who knows a little bit about this show, Kent C. Dodds. Kent, how you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me on. It's kind of nostalgic to be on here. So yeah, hi. It's an honor to be back.
Cool. Why don't you tell people who may not know who you are a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. First off, for some reason the video it doesn't seem to be focusing on me. Is that a problem? Is it focusing on me for you?
It live feed.
Sorry?
You're all set.
Okay.
It's focusing to you.
Okay, cool. This is kind of weird. Okay. So, yeah, I guess I actually started AngularAir. For those who don't know, I started it almost 2 years ago with Todd Motto, and it's been going strong ever since, every week. So, yeah, podcasting has been a big part of my life. Almost a year ago, I changed jobs and changed frameworks, and so I wasn't the right guy to be running AngularAir anymore, and I switched and started JavaScript Air. Incidentally, this is my first official announcement, I guess, but I am sunsetting JavaScript Air as well. So I'm not actually going to be handing it off. I'm just going to be pausing it, maybe someday starting it up again, who knows. But they're just I do a lot of stuff, and I have to kind of pick and choose. So JavaScript Air will be ending on November 2nd with our closing show with Brendan Ike. It's going to be awesome. He was our guest on the first show and will be our guest on the last show, which is kind of poetic. But yeah, podcasting isn't the only content that I create. So hopefully I can provide additional insight in other areas as well.
Cool. Very cool. Well, and Jeff Whelpley will be joining us here shortly as well. So, yeah, I mean, like your announcement here, I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into this stuff, right? Prepping this content, delivering this content, creating technical content. And we always seem to jump into it and dive in, and then you just start taking on more and more because I think it's exciting. And then you find yourself just kind of overwhelmed. So really, why would people want to create technical content and kind of dive into this? Carlos, why don't you tell us a bit about that?
So in my experience, and the way that I've taken on getting technical content out there is more around sharing what I've gone through and trying to transmit some of that context to other people. And the why is because, well, one, it's helpful. If you're interested in really helping people, if it's a thing that you're interested in, it's a big way to do it because building context takes time. And I think when you help people get from here to here quicker, you're a catalyst. There's big rewards for them, but also because you learn a lot as you're creating content for others. You are in my case, I'm talking to people that I wouldn't have access to. Like I talked to a technical leader from NASA on my show. I wouldn't have access to that guy to have even a 5-minute conversation if I hadn't had him on my show. So I think there's a little bit of being really wanting to help people, but at the same time, you are learning yourself. I think those are two big areas that I would put out there.
Yeah, I totally have to agree with that. Like part of the reason that I wanted to start podcasting was because I wanted to be on a podcast. Like I listened to JavaScript Jabber and Adventures in Angular, and I was just like, man, like I would have conversations with them in the car by myself. Like I would, they'd say something and I'd be like, well, that's because of this, or like, what about this other thing? And I was just like, man, I just want to be on the show. And so I started AngularAir. And then actually, incidentally, Adventures in Angular had me on like 2 weeks after our first show, which was kind of funny. But yeah, like it just gives you a really great opportunity to like ask people questions. Like I was able to talk to Brendan Eich for an hour. And the only way I was able to get that time, because he's super busy, he can't just chat with everybody one-on-one that he wants to. I was able to get that time because I could say, hey, our conversation is going to be broadcast to thousands of people. So like lots of people, especially people who are like really pressed for time and helping a lot of different people, they're a lot more motivated to talk with you if they know that they're going to be helping a lot more people. So like you try to increase your time to people helped ratio. And by providing a platform like a podcast, you're able to get more people to talk with you and be on the show. So that's definitely one motivating factor for me. The other one, like Carlos was mentioning, is just the helping the community aspect. There's something that feels great about like helping people consume content, because like the especially the JavaScript space is moving so quickly and things are changing so rapidly that it can be really frustrating for people in the world, and fatiguing, you might even say. And so by touching on all of these different things, it allows people to get enough of a feel of these ideas to know what they should dive deep on, which I think kind of helps relieve some of the fatigue. So I think my reasons for sharing content in podcast form are varied, but yeah, those are a couple of reasons.
So with that, the one thing that I tend to miss in doing joining the show occasionally is the feedback loop. To be able to get feedback from the listeners. Sure, it's like we're sitting here having a conversation, but you want to have some sort of inclusion with the global community as well. How do you feel that goes in terms of allowing others to contribute to the conversation as well?
I personally think that is, at least for my show, it's kind of the essence of the show. I am almost a catalyst for bringing other people to tell their stories. I just prepare a lot, and we'll probably get into that in a bit, to ask the right questions to make sure that I'm not just, we just briefly into that. We do a pre-interview and then we record the show. It's like, and not only I prepare before the show, write questions down, get them approved. Especially with larger companies, you have to do that, or people that represent larger companies. So, but the essence is to bring the other person on the show. Now, I get a lot of feedback from the guest, whoever is on the show, but also I ask for it. I ask for feedback from people, and a lot of the people go back to the guest many times and say, we loved your show because of this, and that feedback somehow gets back to me. But I wish it could be better. I wish we had, because podcasting as a medium doesn't allow you to get comments like a blog post does, right? I wish that could be better, and I'm trying to figure out ways to do that. But at this point, I just tell people, hey, email me. This is my email, and people do email me. You'd be surprised, a lot of people that are like, thank you for asking for my opinion, and here's my opinion. Your show sucks, or I love your show. So it's but I wish it could be better.
Yeah, the feedback. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we're kind of trying to explore here with the fact that we've got this live show and it's a video feed show, right? That like how could we extend that to be more interactive? So we have guests that come on that not only show code samples, but also we could get feedback, live feedback from the community, maybe through hashtags and Twitter that could ask some questions and we could try and get those answered in the moment right there.
Yeah, that was one thing that I did on AngularAir, and I'm doing on JavaScript Air. Is like there's a unique aspect of the show where it's live and it's video, and so people feel a lot more connected in that way, and they can provide feedback like during the show. And when I'm hosting JavaScript Air, I have like I actually somebody asked me, how do you do a podcast like JavaScript Air, and I'll post a link to our conversation. It was a YouTube chat, so you can check that out, get a lot more information on how I run the show. But one of the things that I do is I keep the Twitter open while I'm hosting the show, so I can keep a good pulse on how people are feeling about the show, and that can be helpful. And allowing people to ask questions and have like a Q&A portion of the show has been really valuable. And then also I have a Google form for people to submit feedback. And at the end of every show, I say, like, give us feedback, go to jsair.io/feedback and submit feedback there. So there are ways to get feedback from the audience. And I'm like, I definitely get a lot less feedback than I'd like. But I often will talk with people at conferences or any chance that I get to get feedback, because like, while part of my motivation to do the podcast is about me and the things I want to learn, and ultimately I'm only going to do stuff that I feel like I want to do. I definitely recognize how valuable the stuff that I'm producing is for the community, and I want to, like, that's part of my motivation as well, is to help the community for sure. So tightening that feedback loop is an important aspect as well.
I think another good motivation thing too is the fact that you could have a conversation and talk shop and talk this language with other people, right? I mean, maybe you're sitting there and a lot of times you're developing, you're working on stuff and you're in isolation. And so, yeah, you want to help people, you want to share this knowledge, you want to communicate that, but you also just want to engage and talk the lingo with other people in the community and other people in the industry, right? And delivering technical content gives you this opportunity. Like you're mentioning, like Carlos said, you get this opportunity to open these doors and talk to people that maybe you just wouldn't have an opportunity to, but this platform gives you a channel to start that discussion. And now you have this engagement and you can kind of just get excited and geeked up about talking these words and stuff.
One topic I think it's interesting for us to discuss is the whole idea of why people don't do it, right? So why would you? I'm sure that we've all at some point felt that, you know, why me, right? Why am I? Why do I matter? Why should I voice my opinion or talk about things that I care about? And a lot of people are probably nodding. That anybody watching the show, they might be saying, "Well, but I am not this person, so you know, who's going to listen to my show?" And I think it's a chicken and egg thing that we need to figure out. And basically, how to explain this? At the beginning, you might be thinking, my ideas are not worth sharing, but once they are out there, now they're worth something. People are listening to your ideas and your unique angle. And now all of a sudden it becomes a voice that people want to hear. So you can only start at the beginning. You can only start at step 1. But once you're in step 20, 25, you're going to build an audience. You're going to build a point of view and an opinion that I think is really valuable for people listening. It's a little bit about this syndrome of the impostor syndrome that some of us could be having at some point. And I know that we need to fight that in order to do this type of content. What do you guys think about that?
Sorry, the question was a little long. Maybe you could phrase it down to your exact question.
So what do you think? What do you guys think about getting past this imposter syndrome in order for other people to get started creating content?
Yeah, that's a good question. And people, I actually was on a podcast a couple months ago, where we talked about JavaScript Air, and I encourage people to get into it. And they asked me a question like, well, what about the people who don't feel comfortable getting into that kind of thing? And my answer is basically like, we're all at different, like we all bring different things to the table. Like we're all different kinds of people. And if you feel like you have to do something like start a podcast or speak at a conference to contribute to the world, then you're wrong. You don't have to do that to contribute. There are so many ways to contribute. But if you really, really want to, and it's just a matter of like being a little nervous or it being kind of outside of your comfort zone, then like I can't really relate to that personally, because like it's not really outside of my comfort zone exactly. Like I always get nervous for sure, but it's not outside of my comfort zone. It's something that I've gotten used to. But I know that there are people who have overcome their fears, overcome their their anxiety, and I'm sure that there are people who have shared their story or would be happy to share their story. I mentioned that there are ways to get over that. So if it's something that you really want to do, but you're just like scared to try it, then look for content like that, ways that like you can help overcome your anxiety. Or like if it's something that you want to do and you feel comfortable doing it, you're just not sure where to start, or like if maybe there's already so many like podcasts out there, how could I really contribute? That's also a question people ask. And my response to that question is just do it. Just do it. There is not enough stuff out there. Like people make choices and that's okay. I've talked to many people who say, yeah, I don't listen to JavaScript Air. And while it makes my heart hurt, it's okay. Like there are so many good quality like sources of information. Another thing is like everybody learns differently. And so like some people really like to consume information from podcasts, others like newsletters, others like blog posts. So like in whatever form you feel like you can share your content, share your knowledge, your learnings and your experience, there will be people out there who learn well in that way. So yeah, if you're feeling like nervous to start something, but you really want to, you can do it.
I think another good approach too is finding ways where you could be a part of something. Like, can I be a panelist on this show, or can I just be part of the discussion? That the main focus is not on you from the very beginning. It's more about like, how can I just be a part of this and maybe inject here and there, and then you can kind of control that a little bit more in terms of, okay, I feel comfortable about responding to this question or this mention, and maybe not this one, and you can kind of ease yourself into that feeling of how do I talk in a public forum? How do I share this information? How do I voice my opinions and kind of be okay with that without maybe taking on the overall burden of just jumping right into it completely?
Absolutely. I think one of the factors of getting something started is passion. You have to find something that you're passionate about, something that you really care about. Otherwise, some things fall by the wayside. You get busy, something else comes up, and things always come up. But if it's something that you're passionate about and something that you really, truly care about, then you're going to want to come back to it. You're going to want to keep on pushing to get something done, whether or not it's joining the podcast, whether or not it's creating a blog post or recording some sort of tutorial video. Easier to create than it is to say, apparently. But I think the passion is a very big factor in terms of people sticking with things.
Totally. All right, so I think we've convinced everybody to start contributing, right? So now going forward, how do we, let's talk about the specific mediums of doing that. And, we mentioned a lot about podcasting. I want to talk about podcasting as well as training videos, blog posts and books and stuff like that. Let's start with podcasting and just talk about what's kind of involved in there if you want to get started.
Actually, before we get into that, could I mention one other reason why you would maybe create technical content? I am of the firm belief that there's a process for learning, and the first step is like consuming information. There's like so much to learn out there, so you like just kind of glaze over stuff, and then the next thing is, of those things that you've glazed over, choose the things that you really want to learn, that you're really interested in, and go and build something with that. And that's like you can read books on stuff all you want, but you're not going to actually learn anything until you build something and like experience it. But then the step above that to really solidify your learning is to teach it. And like Ashley Williams on my show like 9 months ago or so, she said something that I thought was really insightful. She said, teaching is nature's way of helping you understand how poor your understanding of something is, something like that. And I totally agree with that. Like once I started teaching about authentication with JOTS, I realized how little I understood about it, and I had to really dive in deep. Or the same with Webpack, and I've been able to learn a lot more about Webpack because people have asked me questions about it. And so, yeah, creating technical content, it kind of forces you into this mode of having to really learn it. So if you want to learn stuff, then go out and try and teach it, even before you feel like you know it totally. This is yet another like area where you might feel like you're an imposter, but you're not. You just don't know it yet, and you can know it. So start teaching it, and that will solidify your learning. So anyway, sorry to like derail your question, but I just wanted to make sure that we mentioned that as another why for creating technical content.
No, that's all right. It's an excellent point. Definitely excellent point. So thank you.
So anyway,
Carlos, why don't you, or Ken or anybody, why don't we talk about podcasting then, and kind of what do you got to get started with that?
So I'll start with, so Ken, you said you do a lot of video podcasts. You've done 2, AngularAir and JavaScript on it, right? So yeah. I think there's 2, we could differ them by that. I'll talk about the non-video podcasts. That's what I do. So I think hold on, let me just, I think I'm not using it today, but I was like, you need a microphone, like you need a real hardware for this sort of thing, where it's, I see you have a really nice one, Kent. You do sort of need to prepare for that, but the thing is, it's the last thing that you want to consider is hardware. Like people get into like, I need the best equipment, I'm gonna buy everything. So I think I want to start off by thinking of what the content is about. Like the medium is somewhat relevant but it's only because of the content. So for example, on my end, I'm telling stories of people that are going through, for example, tech people. The idea is telling their story at work, what it is to be them at work, or professionally, if you would. Then JavaScript at work is around decisions that we're making, that engineering leaders are making at work with JavaScript, whether they're implementing Angular 2 or they decided to ditch it and go to React, which all these different decision-making processes that are happening at a leadership level. So, but it's all about the story. We don't go into code. So because of the story, because of the medium, because of the thing that I'm trying to transmit, audio is really good for that. Or is good enough, if you would. Now, if I were to be talking about code, specifics to like trying to show snippets of code, audio would be just horrendous for that. And I think that's where Kent, you bring, where video is perfect, essentially.
Actually, I'm glad that you brought that up, because lots of people will ask me about that. So just to give a little bit of background, part of the reason, or originally when I started AngularAir with Todd, we had no plans to do audio version of the podcast. But after our very first episode, like within hours, people were asking for an audio version. And so I found a podcast hosting service and I stuck it up there. I didn't really think much of it. But it ended up being like wildly more popular to listen to the show than to watch it, which doesn't surprise me. People can listen to the show while they're commuting and stuff. So it's a lot easier to consume it that way. And so for my shows, there have been a handful of times somebody's done like a screen share or something like that. But mostly the video like aspect of it, the reason that I haven't just gone like full on audio, because like I should say, like, I don't really want to do anything on the podcast that people listening won't benefit from. Like, you're doing like you're sharing your screen of something. Anybody on the audio version is going to be like, what is going on? And so, yeah, but because I'm focusing on making it so the audio members can consume it, like you might think, oh, well, why don't you just go to something simpler with audio? And part of the reason that I do it with Hangouts is because it's just so easy, and it's pretty easy to automate. And that's part of, like, if I couldn't have done it with Hangouts, I probably wouldn't have done it at all, because there's a lot more work that goes into the show, and the fact that it's live, I can also get away with not editing anything and just say, hey, you know, it's live. Like, we made a little blunder in our conversation. That's part of the live podcast. Like, I don't need to edit that out. And so, like, if there's a violation of the code of conduct, then like there have been like 2 of those that I've had to edit out. But yeah, for the most part, like, I don't have to do anything like that. So anyway, I think, like, for people who are just getting started, don't think that it has to be perfect. Like you said, Carlos, like, don't start out worrying about the audio equipment or anything. That stuff will come if once you get really into it. And I do know some people who will not listen to a show or won't watch a screencast because the audio quality isn't perfect. And like, that's just the fact of the matter. Don't worry about it. Just do the best that you can, and some people will benefit. And I think that's part of what's important. I'm just kind of like saying a lot of random things here, so I'm gonna stop talking now.
So about process within podcasts, I think you brought on something that might be really interesting, which is the difference between a recorded podcast and a live podcast. But where does people start thinking about process, and we might be thinking about like post-production and editing and so forth, which is definitely part of it. For me personally, where all my energy goes into is the pre-podcasting, so that I come up with questions that are relevant, that are trying to really bring out a story. So that's how I prepare for those. So, but there's different formats. So again, mine is a different format. If you have a live show, it's maybe your way of keeping the content alive is, again, as for this one, we did some pre-planning, but ideally it's kind of who we invite to the show. How important do you guys think for maybe? And by the way, I apologize if I'm now asking questions, but I want to also include the panelists, because you guys are doing this show all the time. How important is it to do the curation and planning for the live show as well?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that we should talk a little bit more about and get everybody's input, because there is really a lot that you got to think about that goes on behind the scenes of prepping, of how am I going to discuss this topic? How am I going to curate it? How am I going to lead the guests, the panelists into talking about these points, as well as kind of help emphasize? You know, for me, when I'm thinking about doing the panelists and the hosts and stuff like that, I'm thinking about, okay, what are they saying? How can I kind of throw a little line here and there to reinforce what they're saying and help kind of deliver their message to our viewers and emphasize those things. And then the same way, like you're talking about, with thinking about, okay, who am I going to have on? What are the topics that we're going to talk about specifically? But then also kind of getting a background of what have they got going on recently? What kind of things are they talking about? What are other points that could come up at any moment that I could have some material to throw at them or to discuss?
Yeah, at the same time, also listening to the community as a whole, so that you know, or you can ask questions not just related to what I want to know or what Justin wants to know, but what the community is looking for, so that you can kind of see some trends of what people are trying to learn about, what they're trying to focus on, at least at a general level, to be able to hone some questions rather than just your personal focus.
Yeah, I think this is kind of an interesting point. And like, for me to on Mike's point, I definitely care about the community, but I guess I make maybe a flawed assumption that the community cares about what I care about, and so I kind of like the way that I start out my shows before I hit the start broadcast button is I say, okay, so let's all just pretend that we're in the hallway track at a conference. We're all like, we all just came out of a talk about publishing NPM packages. Let's talk about that. Let's continue the conversation. That's how it should feel. It's not going to be like an interview for us. It's more of a conversation and a chat. And I think like, and very rarely, even in the show notes doc, will we have an outline for our conversation. Most of the time, it's just like, I ask, okay, tell me what or why publishing to NPM is even a thing. Like, why don't we just copy the files to our file system and do it that way? And generally, like, that leads to really great conversation. But I think that different podcasts have different formats for good reasons, and there are benefits to to the different styles. One other thing that I wanted to mention from Carlos's original question was about like the pre-process, like before the show. That actually is part of the reason why I'm sunsetting JavaScript Air, is because that is so much work. Everything else around the podcast has been a lot of fun. I especially love like the on-air time. I think that's a lot of fun. But I've really struggled with it's kind of a mundane process of finding guests, convincing them that the show is cool enough for them to come on the show, worth their time, and then coming up with coming up with topics is never a problem. It's mostly finding guests that have the perspectives that I want to highlight, or the varying perspectives. One of the things that I think is really great about JavaScript Air, and I'd always want to keep going, is the diversity of perspective. That I generally try to make it so that each show has at least two people with different opinions. And so like that whole process of getting guests and scheduling things, even like I've automated the heck out of a ton of stuff, but that just takes a ton of work. And so that's part of the reason why JavaScript Air is done. Like a lot of the other pieces in like preparing the website and getting the automation in place, like that was a really great learning experience. And that's another reason to create technical content, is you'll learn a lot of stuff on the side in preparation. Like I've written libraries to make my workshops easier and open source those, and they're in use in production applications now. It's like as a side effect, like in that same vein, Redux was a library that was created for a conference talk. It's a side effect of a conference talk, which is kind of funny to think of Redux being a side effect, but but anyway, I just think that like it can be really valuable learning on that side of things. But once I had all the automation and the website and everything all squared away, the remaining piece of the work was really mundane and really difficult. I just want to do other things with my time. But it's a really great way to get people on the show. It's a really cool thing to do. So I still recommend people do it if you want to. So again, with all the words, but there you go.
Cool. Yeah. So what about like videos as well? I mean, podcasting, real similar. Kind of you start getting set up. You do the podcasting thing. You're kind of recording audio. Maybe you're doing this video podcasting thing, and training videos, that sort of stuff. It's kind of another evolution, another step of delivering content. And we have Jeff on here too. Jeff, I think, joined us now. So.
Yo.
Hey there, Jeff. So, Carlos, I don't know what experience you have with training videos. Maybe we could give a quick background on our training video experience.
So I personally haven't done much training videos. For example, for ngBook, I wasn't part of that. That was something that Nate and Felipe have been working on. But I've seen the process. I've seen the process around. So with Joel Hooks also with Egghead, and I think it's so with every time I talk to Joel about it, I think the biggest thing is, in order to facilitate some of what you discussed earlier, Kent, the difficulties, like the pre-planning, is that you have a format and that you follow every single time. If you have sort of all your videos follow this kind of bullet list kind of approach, that has helped them. But I particularly don't do much video training, unfortunately.
Well, I actually do egghead stuff, so I can give that perspective. So I started doing egghead like 2 years ago or so, with my first course being about authentication with Dodds and Angular. That was fun. I still have Rob Wormald to thank for teaching me what a jot was. But yeah, like that actually made probably one of the biggest impacts on my career of anything else. The podcasts have been really helpful, but Egghead has been amazing. So like, yeah, as far as content, this kind of goes back to how different people learn, different learning styles. And so like some people really, really like the Egghead style. It's 5 minutes long or less. And it's very focused. There's no introduction like, hello, my name is Kenzie Dodds, and today we're going to talk, like none of that. It's very, very focused. Like you are going to learn about this, and I'm going to show you, start recording, boom, we're into it. So I really, really like that approach. It always bothers me when I go to a video tutorial that's like 20 minutes long and half of it is talking about like who this person is and stuff. Like, I'm sure you're a nice person. I'll catch up with you on Twitter. I don't care. Like, show me the stuff that I'm here to learn. So that's one thing. Some people really like the plural site approach, where it's a couple hours of video about this topic, or front-end masters is the same way. And I've done content for or like 2 workshops for front-end masters as well. And I like that like in-person feel. I like that, but I often don't have like 3 hours or a full day to just sit down and learn stuff. So I really prefer to have the like the 5-minute bite-sized thing. Like, I want to learn about this specific topic. Teach me about that in 5 minutes, and then I'll go on. And then like some topics take more than 5 minutes to talk about. Like, how do you build an application with Redux? Like, that's going to take more than 5 minutes. And so you chunk that down into pieces that are 5-minute chunks that are like focused chunks, and then people can just watch the pieces that they care about. So anyway, yeah, like if anybody has specific questions or thoughts about the process of creating video stuff, then we can talk about that, or whatever else you want to talk about.
Justin, oh, go ahead. I was just going to ask Justin about his experience with Linda, right? Because that was probably very in-depth, hours and hours of recording.
Yeah, so I've done training courses for Pluralsight. I've done training courses for Linda as well. And I think one of the things, I mean, the courses that I've done have been these full-length courses. They're bite-sized videos of chunks, but I really have to orchestrate a course as a whole, an hour, 2 hour long, 3 hour long course of material. And one of the challenges in that is really coming up with the curriculum, right? And understanding how you're going to span that across that time frame. And even though you have these kind of bite-sized 3 to 5 minute videos that focus on a specific thing, you really want to take them on a journey from beginning to end and build up code along the way, and the sample project along the way. So you really end up having to try and figure out ahead of time a lot of prep work of going, what is my sample project going to be? What are the features that it's going to have in it that can help illustrate the points that I want to teach, the things that I want to show them how to do. So this application, this project application, has to have features in it that allow me to teach those pieces. And then I've got to orchestrate when I'm going to build each piece and try and figure out, okay, can I build this piece before that piece so that I can teach this in the order that helps them learn? Or am I kind of stuck now and I have to figure out a way of that puzzle of like, I can't really, because it relies on this other, but I don't really want to show this other and just say, oh, well, I'm just going to type this in and you can just ignore it because it's magic and I'll talk about it later. So you're trying to end up deciding, how do I tell that and maybe break that down or build this app in a way that allows me to teach that curriculum in the flow of span of that time.
Yeah, I totally get that. So Egghead also has courses that are broken down, and yeah, that is definitely a struggle. Figuring out the content, like most of my time, especially with courses, is not spent recording. It's spent creating the repo that I'm going to use, and it takes forever sometimes. Like my Webpack course took probably like 200 hours to create. Luckily, I've been able to reuse that a couple times, but yeah, it's a real pain.
Yeah, and I think that's possibly so, because that's not the only way that you can deliver content and build these video content sort of things. I mean, you can do like these smaller videos, these smaller chunks. You can put together a video, a 5-minute video, put that up on YouTube and just share it about talking about one little thing and do several of those. And those are very low dedication in order to kind of get in there and do that. And that's a great starting point for people to just kind of share. Almost think about it like a blog post, right? That you're going to write this little blog post about how to do this thing, how to do some drag and drop, and maybe instead do a screencast and do it for 5 minutes and then throw it out there and get kind of comfortable with that. And then do another one and kind of get a feel for what's involved in recording that, what's involved with the audio planning for that, and then just kind of work your way through that. And that's definitely something that I think the community wants to consume as well. I mean, even with these larger courses that are long 2 to 3 hours, they're still broken up into that somebody could just dive in and look at that one piece. So I think people really want to learn that way with these small chunks. And so there's plenty of opportunity to do that.
Absolutely. And that's a really good way to get into it is just, hey, I created this component. It's simple. It really helped out my project. I think it's kind of cool. And you don't have to go through maybe re-recording, creating it, but even just a walkthrough of, hey, this is the code that I added, and this is how it works, and this is why it works for me, and maybe get positive feedback, and you package it up, and it ends up being an NPM package down the road. Something, it doesn't have to be anything major or important, or just something that you found interesting that you were able to get work and you want to be able to show off. Create a quick little screencast, upload it to YouTube, tweet about it.
One interesting aspect of this that we haven't kind of talked about is how I think there is the aspect of doing this for the community or doing this for kind of a larger audience. But this is actually also really useful just even internally for your team, especially in enterprise, but even smaller teams. I can't even tell you how many times I've gone over it's in turn for something at work, but I've gone over like 50 times with 50 different people just because everybody has to learn it. When you get in the mentality of the benefit of doing a screencast, you can use it, really in a really powerful way to help your internal staff so that they can kind of consume content in the same way as like kind of in this external, more generic, like, okay, there's the Webpack and then Webpack from a general sense, but then there's also at your company, the very specific way that you're implementing it. And if you kind of take that approach in both ways, you can kind of get the same type of benefit internally in your company as we're talking about externally in the community.
Totally. I couldn't agree with you more, Jeff. There have definitely been many times that I've taken that same screencasting workflow that I have for Egghead and just applied it to a specific thing. And you throw it up as an unlisted video on YouTube and, or like, depending on your company, maybe you want to put it in Box or something, but yeah, just distribute it. And this kind of touches on something that I wanted to make sure we didn't, or I didn't forget to mention during the show is this concept that we're all generating content all of the time. Like the water cooler conversation you're having, or like you turn over to your coworker and you say, hey, look at this cool thing. Like that is content. You are generating that content. That conversation you're having is content. And so the trick is figuring out how to take that content that you've generated and make it public. And so this is why I have something called tech chats that I have because I work remotely. I don't really have water cooler conversations with people. Like it's, and so what I'll do instead is I say, hey, I want to learn about test, or I want to learn about AWS Lambda. Find somebody who knows something about that, and then do like a video chat with them. But instead of just doing a video chat for the two of you, make it a hangout on air where you broadcast it to everybody. And so like, we're going to generate this content already. That's just like the natural thing. I have some questions. I want to know the answers. Let me find somebody who does. But let's take that content that we're generating and make it public. And so, yeah, I totally agree, Jeff. Like there are definitely some things that aren't, like it doesn't really make sense to make it public, but maybe public within your company. These conversations that you keep having with your coworkers about work-specific things. But if it's not work-specific, then just make it public to the world, and people like that, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a great entry point too. I mean, again, it's something that somebody can, there's low pressure, right? That you just can kind of say, look, let's broadcast this. We can just kind of not worry about prepping anything. Let's just have this conversation, and then you can kind of break that. If anybody has some aversion to, look, I'm going to be on camera, I'm going to be publicly seen, I'm kind of nervous about that. That's a really great way to just kind of eliminate that part of it and get them comfortable being on camera or doing a screencast or having their voice heard.
Yeah, and I think like for those people as well, you could say, okay, like if you're not comfortable with that one, that's fine. Let's do this over chat. You can answer my questions over chat, and then I'll just take that chat and put it up on a blog post somewhere. Like that can also be really useful. Or like there are times that somebody will ask me a question through in an email, and I'm happy to answer their question. But instead of like, as long as it's not too personal a question, instead of just responding to their email and just leaving it at that, I'll go to my AMA on GitHub, my Ask Me Anything GitHub repo, and I'll post their question as an issue and then answer it there. And so then all of a sudden, the entire world can see the answer. And maybe that's like pretentious of me to think that the entire world would care about my opinion, but I think that's like something you have to get over if you want to start creating content. Is like, yeah, maybe not everybody in the world does want to see your answer, but there are some people who might benefit from it. Like there's a beginner somewhere that could benefit from the knowledge that you have. And I think that's the attitude that you need to have when you're making content in general.
And it could also be the main source of your content. For example, in back to how tech people came to be, it was me having conferences with people, conversations with people at conferences, people who don't get much airtime, if you would, people who don't get to be on stage much, just having a conversation offline. People that have been in the industry for 30 years, that have more experience than many of us, but they don't get to share their ideas, so you don't even get to know their stories. So I thought, how can I want to share this conversation I'm having with this guy who has done this and this and that. How could I, and that's how the podcast came to be, like me being selfish, wanting to record conversations with others because I wanted to maybe re-listen to it or something. And then I thought, I could record this and share it with somebody else. So some of that, sometimes, as you said, Ken, it could become the source of your, the source of your content is somewhat helping others making it public.
So we've done a lot of talking about the AV, the podcast, and the video tutorials. I wanted to kind of get a feel for what your decision points are when to move from that type of format to a blog post. What factors into saying, hey, I want to create this more in-depth article, or what kind of decisions or factors into that for you as you create content?
I'll let Ken go first.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand. Sorry, Mike, can you rephrase?
Sure. So obviously, or it seems at least that your preference is to create video content first, or at least audio content, and posting that online. What's your decision point from maybe saying, all right, well, I'm not going to create this as a video, I'm going to actually create a blog post about that? What goes into switching the format over for you?
Okay, yeah. I'm glad that I asked because I totally misunderstood your question.
No problem.
Yeah, so I actually have a lot of different mediums for sharing content. So like I have a YouTube channel where I'll put stuff. I have my AMA on GitHub. I have my blog. I have a 3-minute podcast that I will post stuff to sometimes. Yeah, there are just like lots of different mediums. And it kind of just depends. I often don't think about it. Like I really don't think, okay, like I want to share this thing. How am I going to share that? It's just kind of what's convenient. So like sometimes I'll just say, okay, I want to share this concept or this idea that I've had. It's not really long, but I don't have time to write a blog post about it. So I'll just like record myself talking about it for 3 minutes and then email it up to my Briefs FM podcast. Or like sometimes it requires seeing some code or something, and so that makes more sense in a blog post form. But if it requires a lot of explanation and stuff, then a video makes more sense. And if I feel like it would be helpful to the platform, which it normally is, then I'll put it on Egghead. And like most of their stuff is free anyway. So I think that they're super awesome for doing that. And then like if if it's something that I really, really care about, then I'll like create a formal talk proposal and propose it at a conference or something, or talk about it at a meetup. And that's actually yet another place where we're generating content and generally not broadcasting that. You should be recording your screen if it's not being recorded for you when you're giving a meetup talk. But yeah, anyway, it just kind of depends on what makes the most sense for me. Maybe like if that didn't answer your question, maybe you could give a specific example. Or...
No, that totally answered my question. It's just some people aren't necessarily comfortable with creating video content, as we've talked about.
Yeah, for sure.
So we wanted to
but
give
Carlos, you can jump in and talk about. Sorry, Mike.
So
Carlos.
I think the way that I would think of creating written content is exactly where Ken said it would make sense, is where you're showing code. At least in my blog, in the our company blog, that's where it goes. Like anything that I need to show code. I personally don't like to envision code, so audio doesn't work for me. In video, sometimes it's like too objective, like we're all talking about something and it's too subjective, while a blog post could be more objective. Again, that's how I see it. So that's whenever I want to try to hone in and show more of the how instead of the what, the how and the why, I go written. But it's more for technical stuff. I think there's a lot of room for non-technical stuff to be on blogs, and that's something I'm trying to figure out at this point. It's, for me, writing is definitely harder than anything else.
Yeah, I have a slightly different viewpoint because at least for the way, I mean, everybody does things slightly differently, right? For me, my blog posts are actually more non-technical, and I do things that are more conceptual but more long-lasting. Like, you know, I'll spend a lot of time on a blog post. That's why I don't write that many of them these days, because I'll spend, you know, like weeks like working on a blog post and making it such that it would be relevant today or in a year or whatever, because I want it to be kind of like really refined and speak to some, you know, it might be somewhat technical related, but it would more be like, okay, instead of talking about the specific way that Angular implements server rendering, it would be more conceptually like, why would you use server rendering in the first place? Like, and those types of reasons. Or I'll just talk about the state of the Angular community in general. But I found that it gives you, especially with like longer form content, this way of having almost like this mini book. You know, like, I mean, if you think of the novels that you like to read, and I think people consume that just differently. Like there's regardless of the popularity and the use of video, there's always going to be a place for just written words, like the blog posts, like mini books, mini novels, because you know, both sometimes you just like to read. There's just a different way of consuming content that, for me at least, with these kind of conceptual themes that need, you know, very specific wording in a way, like in order to get the point across, I found it to be extremely useful.
Yeah, totally agree. I think you know, just that consumption of the written word is always going to be there, and different people learn different ways and want to consume that content in different ways. Maybe they're sitting at work and they're working on some code and they really can't launch a video with some audio and play, and they want to just kind of dissect it. And then also you have with the written stuff, you have this opportunity to kind of copy paste code and grab stuff there where you can't really do that in a podcast or a video, right?
Yeah, it lends itself to illustrating better, like illustrating kind of also make references so you can go back to it. So if you want to revisit it later, it's better suited for that type of format.
I don't know, like on the video side of things though, like one of the nice things you can do is show context. So rather than just like showing here's all of the code, or even like saying, okay, here's the code now, here's the code now, here's the code now, you can actually watch the code being written. And I think that can be really valuable too. But like at the end of the day, I think that people learn differently from each other, and that's like the key point here. And so I generally like to distribute content in the way I like to consume it. I really love listening to podcasts, so I distribute podcasts. I really like watching videos that are egghead style, so that's the kind of thing that I create. I like listening to talks and like participating in workshops. And so, yeah, I often will create the kind of content that I like to consume. And the fact that people can like to consume things differently, I think, is a valuable aspect where we can have a lot of different producers of content who produce content in different ways.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point too. Like, there's a lot of work that we've discussed that goes into all this stuff, right? I mean, a lot of time, a lot of effort. So really, pick something that you're going to enjoy doing. Pick something, the medium that you enjoy. Pick something that you're going to be excited about, because you're going to have to do a lot of work to kind of get it out there, right? So might as well enjoy it while you do it. All right.
One
Well,
other thing, sorry,
yeah,
before
go ahead.
we wrap up, could I mention one other thing that, like, as a danger to people like creating content, something that can happen really quickly is people can feel entitled to the content you've created and feel like they can start telling you how to do it, or like, whatever. It's kind of silly, and just you kind of have to get over that and not worry about what other people say about how you're doing things or what you're doing. Just remember that, like, lots of the reason you're doing this isn't for other people. It's lots of it is for yourself and your own learning. And if people aren't happy with the way that you're doing it, then, like, so what? Who cares? Like, if you're getting out of it what you want, then that's great. Don't let people get you down if they don't like the way that you're doing things. At the same time, though, like, they can be giving you good feedback. So, like, listen to the feedback and not the mean criticisms.
Cool. All right. Well, let's wrap this up with some picks. So, Carlos, why don't you start? Do you have any picks for us?
Picks. What's a pick?
Picks. Sorry. Tips and picks. Any type of last minute thing that you want to share? Go check this out. This sort of thing.
Sure. Well, one thing, I think we missed tools, and I just wanted to point out a tool that I kind of, my life kind of depends on. It's Calendly. I just, FYI, that's like the way that I survive for organizing meetings and scheduling the podcast. Well, if anybody's interested in listening to Tech People podcast, Jeff has been in the show and as a guest. And again, it's trying to get some of that context of who we are as tech people and what goes on in our professional lives. Hopefully, you guys enjoy it. It's a very well curated program. The first episode was probably sucks, but now I'm getting better as time goes by. But yeah,
he's being modest. He's being modest. His podcast is awesome. Everybody here should listen to it. If you don't listen to it, you're being ridiculous.
Thank you.
Cool. All right, Kent, you got some picks?
Yeah, I do. So I mentioned during the show a couple of links. I've got that in the show notes, so hopefully everybody will see that later. So, of course, check out JavaScript Air for the last couple episodes. Yeah, all the episodes are up on the website, and so javascriptair.com. And then the Yarn package manager came out today, released from Facebook. It works with the NPM registry. There are a couple of kinks with private packages and stuff that they're working out. But for the most part, it's lickety-split fast. It's more secure and more reliable. So, and NPM officially released, like, hooray, Yarn, they're awesome. This is good for the community. So it's not like a fork of the community or anything. It's a good thing. And it works interchangeably with NPM, or it's supposed to. And if it doesn't, it's a bug, and you can bug them about it. So yeah, check out Yarn. And then another little tip that's kind of related to my decision to sunset JavaScript Air is that you should make choices based off of your priorities. Do what you feel is right and what you want to do. So if you're doing stuff and people are totally loving you for it, that feels great. But if it's not what you want to do anymore, that's okay. Just, you can move on. It's fine. Do what you want to do. That when you feel like it's the right thing. And then the last thing I have here that might be of interest is I posted on my AMA, my Ask Me Anything thing on GitHub, an answer to the question, what hardware and software do you use for recording your Egghead.io lessons? So this has a bunch of really good links to stuff that you should go check out. And that's it for me.
Cool. And Mike, what you got?
Just two quick picks. One is Angular Connect videos. I know we talked about that when we talked about with Shy, but definitely go back and check out a lot of the videos from the conference. There's a lot of really good content that came out of there by a lot of the speakers. Other pick is ng Bootstrap. I've been using that library on an application that I'm currently working on, and to allow you to get the Bootstrap functionality there without having to pull in jQuery as a dependency. It's replicating all the functionality in the Angular way. So ng Bootstrap, I'll have the link in the notes as well.
Cool. And Jeff, you have anything for us?
Yeah, there is a conference coming up in a couple of weeks in Israel, Angular Up, and a bunch of great people speaking at it, including Shy, including Yuri, Sheikh, and a bunch of other well-known people from the community. It's really going to be really well run, and so especially if you live around there, that section of the world, definitely check it out. Angular Up. It's angular-up.com for the website.
I'm going to just throw this in there as well. If you haven't heard of it, NG Cruise is a thing. Like Cruise, Conference, Angular. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, we actually broke that story, NG Cruise. That was at Angular Connect. I mean, the audio was terrible. So maybe nobody heard it, but we had Tracy, who's one of the instigators of NG Cruise on, and she announced it initially to the world, and then Joe Eames talked about it on stage. So yeah, everybody should sign up for NG Cruise. Kent's going to be there.
Very cool.
I'm giving him pressure.
Yeah. Get on the boat, man. Get on the boat. All right. Well, thanks so much to Carlos and Kent for joining us and our panelists. It's been an awesome show. Hope everybody loved it. And have a good one.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, guys. It was an honor.